The planet Drelos 9 was dry, dusty, and mostly forgotten. Long ago, it had been full of factories and machines. Now, only junk remained. Metal towers stood like skeletons, and broken ships lay scattered across the ground. Most people avoided the place, but Marcus Vell called it home. Marcus was a human, tall, quiet, and strong from years of hard work. He had a beard that looked like it hadn't been trimmed in months and eyes that studied everything like a machine. People from the nearby outpost said he was strange. He didn't care. He liked being alone. His only friends were the tools in, his bag and the small repair robot that followed him everywhere, which he called Sparks. Every morning, Marcus walked through the junkyard looking for useful scrap, solar panels, broken engines, wires, or anything else he could fix. He built things, sometimes machines, sometimes strange gadgets. He wasn't rich, but he was smart. He knew how to take what others threw away and make something better. One hot afternoon, Marcus was walking near an old crashed freighter when he heard something strange. A sound, soft, like a cry. He stopped. The wind blew through the junk, making whistles and moans. But this was different. He turned his head, listening carefully. There it was again. A weak, frightened whimper. "Sparks," Marcus whispered. "Scan for life signs." The little bot lit up and beeped. A tiny red light blinked near a pile of metal sheets. Marcus moved quickly but carefully. He lifted one of the sheets, then another. Underneath was a small, curled-up figure, an alien girl. Her skin was a soft lavender color, and her large, glowing eyes were full of fear. She held something in her arms, a woman, older, badly hurt, barely breathing. The girl backed away as Marcus knelt down. "It's okay," he said gently. "I won't hurt you." She didn't answer, but her eyes showed confusion. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. The woman with her, most likely her mother, was unconscious. Marcus slowly reached into his pack and pulled out a water pouch. He placed it on the ground between them and stepped back. The girl looked at the pouch, then at Marcus. After a few seconds, she grabbed it and helped her mother drink. Her hands were shaking. "What's your name?" Marcus asked softly. The girl said nothing but pointed at herself and whispered, "Luma." Marcus nodded. "I'm Marcus." He looked around. The freighter must have crashed weeks ago. No rescue ships had come. On Drelos 9, no one cared much about crash survivors, especially if they were aliens. He knew others would leave them here, to die. But he couldn't do that. "Can your mother walk?" he asked. Luma shook her head. "Then we'll need something to move her." Marcus walked off into the junkyard and returned a few minutes later with a small hover sled, once used to carry cargo. He fixed the controls quickly with Sparks' help, then gently placed the mother on it with Luma's help. "My place isn't far," he said. "You'll be safe there." The girl looked unsure, but followed. They moved through the dusty metal paths until they reached Marcus's home, a shelter built from old ship parts and metal walls. Solar panels covered the roof, and wind turbines spun slowly nearby. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. It was clean, warm, and full of tools and machines that Marcus had repaired over the years. Inside, he set the mother on a soft bed made from old cushions and activated a medical drone. It scanned the woman and started giving treatment. Luma watched nervously, but Marcus spoke gently. "She's stable, just weak. She'll need time to heal." Luma sat beside her mother, eyes wide and tired. Marcus handed her a warm protein bar and a blanket. She didn't thank him, but she didn't refuse either. That night, Marcus sat by the window, watching the stars. Sparks beeped beside him. "She's just a kid," Marcus said. "Alone in a junkyard. What kind of world lets that happen?" He thought about his own past. Years ago, he had been like Luma, lost and angry after the wars. He knew what it felt like to be forgotten. That's why he had come to Drelos 9, to be left alone. But now, maybe it was time to do something more. The next morning, Marcus began drawing plans. If they were going to stay, they needed a better shelter. One strong enough to protect them. One made from scrap, but filled with heart. The sun rose over Dralos 9 the next morning, casting a pale orange light over the junkyard. Marcus sat at his workbench, carefully cleaning a broken tool. Sparks, the small repair bot, beeped beside him, busy with its own tasks. Luma and her mother, Selah, were still resting in the small shelter. Luma hadn't spoken much since the night before, but Marcus noticed her studying everything with wide eyes. The girl was cautious, but she was beginning to trust him. Slowly. Marcus looked over at the corner of his workspace where plans for a new shelter were spread out on an old piece of metal. The current structure wasn't going to be enough for long. They needed something stronger, something that would protect them from the storms that sometimes raged across the planet. He could already imagine it. A sturdy shelter, a home built from the junk around him. First, he needed a plan. He grabbed a piece of scrap metal and began drawing designs on it with a rusty old marker. Luma entered the room quietly, watching him. From the doorway, Marcus didn't look up but spoke softly. "You're awake? How's your mom?" Luma nodded. "She is better. Still sleeping," she whispered, her voice soft like a breeze. "I'm hungry." Marcus smiled and stood up. "I can fix that." He opened a small compartment on the wall and pulled out dried food packs. He handed one to Luma, who took it carefully. "Thank you," she said, her voice still hesitant but growing in confidence. Marcus nodded, then pointed at the plans on the table. "I'm going to build you both something better than this shelter, something strong, where you'll be safe." Luma didn't answer at first. She just stared at the plans, as if she didn't understand. Then, slowly, her face softened. "A home?" she asked, her voice full of curiosity. "That's right," Marcus said. "A real home. But it's going to take some work. I'll need your help." Luma raised an eyebrow. "Help? What can I do?" Marcus picked up a broken solar panel and turned it in his hands. "Well, you're good with your hands, right? I saw you fixing some things when you were in the junkyard. If you help me with the building, we'll finish faster." Luma hesitated but nodded. "I'll help." As the days passed, the bond between Marcus and Luma grew stronger. Selah rested and healed, the medical bot working hard to help her, but it was clear that she still needed more time. Meanwhile, Marcus and Luma worked together, sorting through the junk piles to find the best materials for the new shelter. Luma, though still a little shy, quickly became skilled at welding and repairing. Marcus taught her the basics, showing her how to use the tools and how to connect the different parts. One evening, as they worked together to build a frame for the new structure, Luma spoke up. You're different from other humans." Marcus looked over at her, surprised by the statement. "How so?" "You help," she said simply. "Most humans, they leave us. But you stay." He didn't know how to respond at first. His past wasn't something he liked to think about. He had been one of the other humans once, selfish and angry. But now, things were different. He had something to fight for. "I'm not like most people," Marcus said finally. "I don't think anyone should be left behind." Luma smiled, her eyes brightening. For the first time since he had found her, she seemed truly hopeful. The next few days were a blur of work. Marcus and Luma spent every waking hour putting together their new home. They used scavenged parts from the junkyard, old ship frames, metal beams, broken engines, and turned them into something functional. The solar panels they repaired would power everything, and Marcus designed a simple water filtration system using old pipes. Despite the hard work, there was a sense of excitement in the air. Every small success made them both feel like they were building something more than just a shelter. They were building a future. By the end of the week, the new shelter was nearly complete. The walls were solid, and the roof was covered with metal sheets. It wasn't much, but it was sturdy. There was a small room for Sayla to rest, and a larger common area where Marcus and Luma could work. The place felt warmer, brighter. Even though the wind still howled outside, the shelter was secure. That night, as Marcus stood outside looking at their work, Luma joined him. She didn't say anything at first, just stood next to him and looked out over the junkyard. "You did it," she said quietly. Marcus smiled, but it was a tired smile. "We did it," he corrected. "It's just the beginning, though." Luma nodded. "Thank you." He turned to look at her. "You've helped more than you know." For a long moment they just stood there, watching the stars above them. The junkyard was still, but for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel empty. The place was filled with hope, a hope that had come from something simple, a human who decided to care, and an alien girl who refused to give up. Days turned into weeks, and the shelter Marcus and Luma had built together was more than just a home. It was a place of transformation. Sayla, Luma's mother, had recovered enough to sit up and speak again. While Marcus focused on fine-tuning the shelter's systems, Luma and her mother started adjusting to their new life. The junkyard no longer felt like a place of desolation. The walls of the shelter, built with care, felt like a safe space. Inside, everything was neat and organized. The solar panels provided steady energy and the water filtration system was working perfectly. Marcus had even set up a small garden where a few hardy plants grew, thriving in the dusty soil. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Luma had been spending more time helping Marcus, learning how to fix small machines and tools. The girl was quick to learn, her eyes bright with curiosity, as she picked up welding rods, circuit boards, and old tech that had been discarded. She could already repair simple devices, and Marcus could see the potential in her. She wasn't just learning from him. She was teaching him things too. Her species, the Tiravi, had advanced technology that was very different from human tech, and she often showed him new methods to make things work better. One afternoon, while Marcus was fixing a power generator, Luma sat on the floor nearby, watching him with interest. Her large, glowing eyes were focused on the small movements of his hands as he worked. "What is that you're doing?" Luma asked, her voice quiet but full of curiosity. Marcus glanced up at her, wiping his brow. "Just fixing this generator. It's not perfect, but it's good enough for now. I'm making sure we have enough power when the storms hit." "Storms?" Luma's voice was a little uncertain. She hadn't been here long enough to fully understand the planet's dangers. Marcus nodded. "The wind here can get pretty fierce. We'll need all the power we can get to keep the shelter safe." Luma nodded slowly, her eyes scanning the generator. "I can help," she said after a moment. "My people. We have ways to adapt energy systems. I could show you some ideas." Marcus was surprised. He had never thought about combining their technologies. He had always relied on his own skills to fix things. But there was something about the way Luma spoke, her voice steady and confident, that made him believe she could help. "All right," Marcus said, wiping his hands on a rag and sitting down beside her. "Show me what you've got." For the next few hours, the two of them worked side by side. Luma explained some of the Tiravi methods, showing Marcus how to improve the generator's energy efficiency by using magnetic fields and harnessing solar energy in new ways. Marcus followed her instructions, amazed by how easily she communicated complex ideas, even though she was so young. "You're brilliant," Marcus said, looking at the improved generator with admiration. Luma smiled shyly. "I learned from my people," she said softly. "They taught me many things." Marcus nodded, understanding. The Tiravi must have had a rich history of knowledge and technology. It was clear Luma had inherited some of that brilliance. As the days passed, Marcus and Luma continued to work together, learning from each other. Sometimes Marcus would teach her how to repair an old piece of human technology, and sometimes Luma would show him a new way to improve the shelter. They laughed together, and slowly Marcus began to feel a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in years. One evening, after another long day of work, Marcus found Luma sitting alone outside the shelter, looking up at the stars. The sky was clear, and the stars shone brightly as they always did on Dralos 9. Marcus walked over and sat beside her. "You know," he began, "when I first got here, I thought I was alone forever. I thought I didn't need anyone. But now, it's different." Luma turned to him, her eyes wide and curious. "Different? How?" Marcus smiled softly. "Before, I just fixed things for myself. But now, I'm fixing things for us. For you, for your mother, and for me." Luma looked up at the stars, her face thoughtful. "I didn't think anyone would care," she said quietly. "I thought we would be left here to die like all the others." Marcus's heart tightened. He could feel the pain in her words. He understood. There were so many like Luma and Selah, stranded, forgotten, left to fend for themselves. But Marcus wasn't like others. He wouldn't turn away. "We're not alone," Marcus said firmly. "Not anymore." Luma smiled, the faintest hint of hope in her eyes. "Thank you." Marcus nodded. "You don't need to thank me. We're in this together. I'll always have your back." From that moment on, Marcus and Luma's bond grew stronger. She became more confident, more comfortable with herself, and her mother, Selah, began to recover as well. The family was slowly healing, both physically and emotionally. The junkyard, once a place of isolation and fear, was now a place of safety, warmth, and growth. And as the shelter grew, so did their sense of hope. The stars above Dralos 9 seemed brighter somehow, as if they were guiding Marcus, Luma, and Selah toward a future they never thought possible. Together, they had created something that went beyond survival. It was a home, built not just from scrap, but from the care, compassion, and hard work that each of them had given. Life in the junkyard had changed. The air around Marcus, Luma, and Selah felt different now, charged with hope and purpose. The shelter was secure, and the work they did together had created something that went beyond survival. It was a home. But Marcus knew that Dralos 9 was still a dangerous place, and trouble was never far away. One afternoon, as Marcus worked on repairing a communications relay, he heard the hum of a hovercraft in the distance. It was faint, but the sound carried through the still air of the junkyard. Marcus froze, listening carefully. The sound wasn't coming from a passing ship. It was getting closer. "Trouble," Marcus muttered to himself, glancing over at Luma, who was busy sorting through a pile of old circuit boards. Luma looked up, noticing the change in Marcus's expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for his small weapon, hidden in a compartment near the door. He wasn't a violent man, but on a planet like Dralos 9, it was always wise to be prepared. He looked out the small window and saw a dust cloud in the distance. The hovercraft was getting closer. "They're coming," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Stay inside." Luma nodded and hurried to the shelter's entrance, standing behind the door to stay out of sight. Marcus quickly finished securing the shelter, locking the door and making sure the solar-powered shields were activated. The junkyard wasn't exactly a fortress, but it was the best they had. By the time the hovercraft reached the edge of the junkyard, Marcus was already standing. In the doorway, arms crossed, waiting. The vehicle slowed as it approached, revealing a group of men and women dressed in worn, dusty clothing. They were part of the local scavenger gang, a group of people who made a living by stealing from crash sites and exploiting those stranded on Dralos 9. The leader of the group, a tall man with a scar across his face, stepped out of the vehicle. He eyed Marcus with a mixture of curiosity and hostility. Well, what do we have here?" the man said, his voice rough. A human with a pair of aliens. I didn't think we'd find anything this interesting out here in the scrap. Marcus stood his ground, not showing fear. What do you want? The leader grinned, showing a row of yellowed teeth. We've been watching this junkyard for a while, and we think it's time we had a little conversation. Marcus didn't need to be told twice. He knew exactly what they wanted. His resources. The scrap metal, the solar panels, and anything else of value. The scavenger gang didn't care about the people living here. To them, everything was just a thing to be stolen and sold. We're not interested in selling, Marcus said firmly. You need to leave. The man's grin faded, replaced by a dangerous glint in his eye. I don't think you understand, human. We take what we want and you don't have much choice in the matter. Behind him, his gang members began to move toward the junkyard, their eyes scanning the piles of scrap. Marcus could see that they weren't just after the materials. They were looking for trouble. Luma, watching from the window, felt her heart race. She could sense the tension in the air. She wanted to help, but she didn't know how. She remembered the ways her people fought back when they were cornered. But she was still too young, too small, and the gang was too dangerous. As the gang leader moved closer, Marcus's mind raced. He couldn't fight them all, and he wouldn't risk Luma and Sayla's safety. He had to think of something. I suggest you leave, Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. Before things get worse, the leader sneered. What are you going to do, human? You've got a shelter, sure, but it's just junk. You can't stop us. Marcus's eyes narrowed. He had no intention of letting them take anything, but he also knew that he couldn't let the gang harm anyone. There was no choice but to defend himself. He glanced at the control panel near the door. It was simple but effective. All right, Marcus said, slowly stepping back into the shelter. You want to take something? Try this. He pressed a button, and the ground beneath the gang shifted. The old cargo hovercraft which Marcus had been working on powered up, lifting off the ground with a hum. It wasn't much, but the hovercraft could be used to cause a distraction. The gang leader's eyes widened in surprise as the craft lifted higher. Before the group could react, Marcus activated the small drone army he had been building, a series of modified old military drones that hovered above them, their engines buzzing menacingly. You don't want to do this, Marcus said, as the drones encircled the gang. You're outnumbered. The gang leader looked furious. You think you can scare us with toys? We'll take everything anyway. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. He wasn't going to let them harm Luma or Sayla. His hands rested on the control panel, his finger hovering above the button that would trigger the drone's defensive systems. The gang could either leave now, or they could face the consequences. Luma, peeking from the window, felt a surge of pride. Marcus wasn't backing down. He was standing up for them. And for the first time since they had arrived on Drelos 9, Luma felt a sense of strength inside her. The gang leader hesitated, glancing at his crew. They clearly didn't want to risk a fight with someone who was prepared for trouble. After a long pause, the leader grunted in frustration. Fine, he said, turning to his gang. We'll get out of here, but don't think this is over. Without another word, the gang backed away and climbed into their hovercraft. As they left, the dust cloud behind them began to settle. Marcus didn't move until the hovercraft disappeared from view. Only then did he let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Luma stepped outside, her voice trembling. Are they gone? Marcus nodded. For now. The sun set over Drelos 9, casting long shadows across the junkyard. Marcus stood outside, his arms folded, watching the horizon. The danger had passed for now, but he knew it wasn't over. The gang might be gone, but there were others like them, hungry for anything they could take. Marcus had no illusions about the world they were living in. It was a hard, unforgiving place where survival was a daily battle. Luma and Sayla had stayed inside, safe for now, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were not out of danger yet. He turned to head back into the shelter when he heard a noise. A faint hum, almost too soft to hear. "Sparks," he whispered. "Scan for incoming vehicles." The small bot beeped and flitted around Marcus's feet before floating up to eye level. It flashed a green light. "Warning. Unknown craft approaching," Sparks said in its mechanical voice. Marcus's heart sank. Another group? Or was it the same gang coming back for more? He turned quickly and hurried back to the shelter, entering just in time to see Luma and Sayla standing near the window, looking out at the approaching craft. "It's them, isn't it?" Luma asked, her voice tight with worry. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He could see the craft now, a large, heavily modified transport ship flying low toward the junkyard. The gang leader's words echoed in his mind. "This isn't over." The feeling of dread grew in his chest. "Stay inside," Marcus said firmly. "Lock the door and don't come out unless I say so." Luma and Sayla nodded, and Marcus turned to face the shelter's small control panel. He quickly activated the defensive drones and powered up the hovercraft once again, positioning it in front of the shelter. He wasn't sure what kind of fight this would be, but he wasn't going to let anyone take what he had worked so hard to build. Not now. The ship hovered over the junkyard, and then it landed with a soft thud. The door opened, and out stepped the gang leader, along with several of his men. They were back, but this time they were more prepared. The leader's eyes scanned the area, landing on Marcus, who stood ready, fists clenched. "You still here?" the leader called out with a smirk. "We've come to settle things, human." Marcus stood tall, not backing down. "You won't take anything from here," he said coldly. The gang leader chuckled, stepping forward with two of his men at his side. "We've been watching you. You've got a nice little setup here, but it's not yours to keep." Marcus's mind raced. He didn't have enough drones or weapons to take them all on, and the gang was clearly ready for a fight. They had brought more people this time, and they weren't going to back off easily. Luma's voice came from the shelter's window. "Marcus, don't do this." Marcus turned to see Luma watching him. Worry etched on her face. His heart tightened, but he didn't let it show. He couldn't let them take everything he had worked for. Not now, not after everything they had built together. The leader raised his hand, signaling his gang to surround Marcus. "You don't have a choice, human. You can either give us what we want, or we'll take it." Marcus's pulse quickened, but he stayed calm. He wasn't about to let them take the shelter, not without a fight. He could already see the escape routes, the weak spots, the angles where he could make his stand. "I won't let you take anything," Marcus said again, his voice low and steady. "You're outnumbered. Turn around and leave." The gang leader's eyes narrowed, and he motioned for one of his men to move forward. But just as the man took a step, there was a loud, whirring sound overhead. The small drones Marcus had activated earlier flew down, buzzing around the gang like a swarm of angry bees. "Back off," Marcus warned, stepping forward. "You're not going to scare me." The gang leader seemed to consider this for a moment. He looked up at the drones, calculating his next move. But before he could act, a voice from behind him called out, "Stop." The voice was sharp, filled with authority. Marcus blinked in surprise, and the gang leader turned around quickly. Standing at the edge of the junkyard was Sayla, weak but standing tall. Her eyes locked with the gang leader's, and there was no fear in her gaze. She stepped forward, her voice steady. "We've had enough," she said, her words slow but powerful. "We're not going to let you take from us anymore. You've already stolen too much." The gang leader seemed taken aback, but then he sneered. "And what are you going to do about it? You're just an injured alien." Sayla's eyes burned with determination. "I may be injured, but I am not weak, and neither is my daughter." At her side, Luma stepped forward, her hands clenched into fists. "We don't need your help. We have our own strength." Marcus's heart raced. Luma and Sayla weren't backing down either. They had changed since they arrived, becoming stronger, braver. It wasn't just him anymore. They were in this together. The UEDD gang leader hesitated, looking at the defiant faces before him. For a moment, there was silence. Then, with a grunt of frustration, he waved his hand. "This isn't over, human," he growled. "Next time, you won't be so lucky." With that, the gang turned and retreated, climbing back into their ship. The engines roared to life and the craft lifted off, disappearing into the distance. Marcus let out a long breath, feeling his muscles relax. He turned to Selah and Luma, who had returned to the shelter. The danger had passed. For now. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly. "I don't think they'll be back after this." Selah nodded, her expression soft but firm. "We're stronger, now. And so are you." Weeks had passed since the last confrontation with the scavenger gang. The tension had faded, but the scars of the encounter remained in Marcus's mind. The junkyard was still a dangerous place, but he had something more important now, a purpose. And that purpose wasn't just to survive anymore, it was to protect the home he had built with his own hands. The shelter was starting to feel like a real home. Selah had recovered much of her strength, and her once frail figure was now full of life. She spent her days helping Marcus with the repairs and teaching Luma the ancient ways of the Tiravi people. The girl, once shy and uncertain, was now confident, her eyes bright with determination. Luma was learning not just from Marcus but also from Selah, who shared stories and skills that Marcus could never have imagined. Together, they built a life among the wreckage. One afternoon, Marcus worked on a new system to better regulate the power supply to the shelter. Sparks hovered nearby, assisting as always while Luma worked beside him. She was starting to understand more about how the technology on Drelos 9 functioned, and she was impressing Marcus with her quick thinking. "Try connecting these wires here," Luma said, pointing to a section of the power regulator. Her voice was confident now, no longer hesitant like it had been when Marcus first met her. "It should help improve the flow." Marcus looked at her in surprise. "You're really starting to get the hang of this," he said, impressed. Luma smiled, her eyes glowing with pride. "I've been watching, and I've learned a lot from you." Marcus felt a warmth in his chest. It wasn't just the success of the project that made him happy. It was the way Luma had transformed from a scared girl hiding in the junkyard into someone who could stand tall and think for herself. He saw in her the same resilience that had once been a part of him, buried deep inside after the wars. As they finished the project, Luma took a step back, inspecting their work. "This will make the shelter much stronger," she said, clearly pleased with their progress. Marcus nodded. "Good job, Luma." "Thank you," she replied, her voice soft but strong. Just then, Selah walked into the shelter, her face alight with excitement. "Marcus, Luma, come outside. You have to see this." Marcus raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. He followed Selah outside, with Luma close behind. The air was cool, a soft breeze blowing through the junkyard. In the distance, the faint outline of a new ship could be seen approaching. It wasn't a gang this time, but something different. A peaceful-looking ship with markings that didn't look like the scavenger gang's symbols. Marcus frowned, unsure of what to make of it. He didn't trust strangers, not after everything. That had happened. But this ship looked like it belonged to someone who didn't want to cause trouble. The ship landed gently in the clearing near their shelter. The hatch opened and a figure stepped out. It was a woman, tall and graceful with silver hair that shimmered under the sun. Her eyes were a pale green, and she wore a simple yet elegant outfit that marked her as someone from a far-off world. She had the air of someone who had seen many things in her life. "Are you Marcus Vell?" the woman asked, her voice calm and composed. Marcus hesitated for a moment, studying the woman. He didn't recognize her, and he certainly hadn't invited anyone to visit. Still, he nodded. "Yes, I'm Marcus. Who are you?" The woman smiled. slightly, stepping forward. "My name is Anira. I come from the Tiravi Alliance. I've been looking for you." Marcus felt a twinge of surprise. The Tiravi Alliance? He had heard of them, but he never thought he'd meet someone from the peaceful, advanced civilization. "Looking for me? Why?" Anira glanced at Luma, who was standing beside Marcus, eyes wide with curiosity. "I know you've been helping. My people. I've been sent to offer my thanks, and perhaps a little more." Luma stepped forward, her voice a little uncertain. "You know my mother?" Anira nodded. "I know her well. She is one of our leaders, and I've been following her story. We owe you a great deal, Marcus. You've given her and her daughter a new chance at life." Marcus exchanged a glance with Selah, who had a soft smile on her face. "I didn't do anything special," Marcus said, his voice modest. "I just helped where I could." Anira looked at him with understanding. "You don't know how much that means. The Tiravi have long had a difficult relationship with humans, but you've proven that compassion can cross any divide." Marcus felt his cheeks flush slightly. It wasn't something he expected to hear, and it was humbling. He had never done anything with the intention of receiving praise. He had just done what felt right. But now, seeing Luma's hopeful expression and hearing Anira's words, he realized something important. His actions were changing more than just his own life. Luma stepped closer to Anira, her eyes full of wonder. "Are you going to take us back to the Tiravi homeworld?" she asked, her voice hopeful. Anira smiled warmly. "Not yet, but we can offer you something that might be just as valuable. A place in the Alliance. You've done more than enough to prove that you belong among us. I think the Tiravi can learn a lot from humans like you." Selah nodded in agreement. "It is a great honor." Marcus stood quietly, processing everything that had been said. He had spent so many years in isolation, building things, fixing things, only for himself. He had never imagined that he could be part of something larger, something greater than just survival. Looking at Luma, at Selah, and at Anira, he realized that he had already found his place. The days after Anira's arrival felt different. The air in the junkyard was charged with a new kind of energy, a sense of possibility. Marcus, Luma, and Selah had been living quietly, building their life from the scraps of the world around them. But now, it seemed like their small corner of Dralos 9 had become more than just a safe haven. It had become a symbol of something greater. Anira's visit wasn't just about gratitude. It was the beginning of something else. She had spent days talking to Marcus and Luma, learning about their life, their struggles, and the shelter they had created. The more she listened, the more she became convinced that what they had built here could be more than just a home for the three of them. It could be a place for others too, a sanctuary for those who had nowhere to go. "I can see it now," Anira said one afternoon, her green eyes gleaming with excitement as she stood with Marcus outside the shelter. "This place, this junkyard, could be a refuge for anyone who's lost, a place where people aren't just surviving, but thriving." Marcus looked around at the makeshift home they had built, the sturdy walls, the solar panels on the roof, the small garden they had cultivated. It wasn't much, but it had been enough for them. He hadn't considered that others might want to join them. After everything he'd been through, he was used to being alone. But now, standing beside Anira, he began to see what she meant. This place was more than just scrap and metal. It was a testament to survival, yes, but it was also a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, people could create something beautiful. It wasn't just a shelter, it was a home, built from nothing but determination and compassion. Luma and Selah joined them outside, the warmth of the sun on their faces. Luma, now more confident than ever, smiled up at Anira. "Do you think others will come here?" she asked, her voice full of hope. Anira nodded. "Yes, the Tiravi are a peaceful people. But we have many refugees, many stranded on different worlds. This could be a place where they can find safety and help. I think your family's story can inspire them." Marcus hesitated. "But we've built this with our hands. It's ours. I don't know if I'm ready to share it with anyone else." "I understand," Anira said, her voice soft but firm. "But remember, Marcus, what you've built here is not just for you. It's for anyone who needs it. You didn't build this alone, and you don't have to keep it to yourself. The Tiravi can help, and we can spread the word. Others will come, and they'll want to help too." Zayla, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "You've done something good here, Marcus. Don't let fear keep you from doing more. This place, it's not just a shelter anymore. It's a symbol of hope." Marcus looked at her, his heart swelling with emotion. He had spent so long trying to keep everything to himself, convinced that he could do it alone. But now, with Luma and Sayla by his side, and with Anira's support, he realized that this wasn't just his dream anymore. It was theirs. And it could be something even bigger. "I guess you're right," Marcus said finally, nodding slowly. "This place could be more. We could help others. It's time to stop holding back." Anira smiled. "That's the spirit, Marcus. You've already proven that you can make something from nothing. Now, it's time to share it with the galaxy." Over the next few weeks, Marcus, Luma, Sayla, and Anira worked together to expand their sanctuary. They used more of the scrap metal from the junkyard, creating new structures to house more people. Anira brought in supplies from the Tiravi, including advanced technology to improve the shelter's energy systems and make it more comfortable. Soon, the junkyard was no longer a place of isolation. It was a thriving community. Word began to spread. People from nearby worlds, stranded like Luma and Sayla had been, heard about the sanctuary and came seeking refuge. At first, it was just a few. They were cautious, unsure of what to expect. But as more arrived, they saw that this place wasn't just about survival. It was about rebuilding, about creating something better from the wreckage of the past. The community grew slowly at first, but with every new arrival, the Junkyard Sanctuary became more than just a shelter. It became a home, a place where people could heal, rebuild, and thrive. It was a place of compassion, where the broken and the lost could find hope once again. One evening, as Marcus sat on the roof of the shelter, looking out at the stars, Luma joined him. She had grown taller over the months, and her confidence was now a part of her, shining through in everything she did. "This is better than I ever imagined," Luma said softly, sitting beside him. Marcus smiled. "Yeah, it's better than I imagined, too." Luma glanced over at him. "I think this is just the beginning. There are so many more people out there who need help. This place, it's going to change the galaxy." Marcus nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle in his chest. He had spent years running from his past, but now he realized that he had found his place. This was where he was meant to be. Not alone, but surrounded by others who understood the value of compassion and community. As the stars shone above them, Marcus looked out at the Junkyard Sanctuary that had become his home, and he knew that it was no longer just a place of survival. It was a symbol of what humanity could achieve when it refused to give up, when it chose to build rather than destroy, and, for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt a sense of belonging. This was where he was meant to be, and together they would continue to build.